Everybody wants a better life. Everybody wants more health, wealth, and happiness. Yet the only way to truly have that is by starting with having a growth mindset. On today's episode, we go deep with a gentleman who has built this into his culture, built this into his business. And as a result, sales come easy. As a result, the health, wealth, and happiness comes easy because he has a growth mindset. Today's episode, we're going to talk specifically how you can also have a growth mindset. Things you might be missing, things you might be already nailing. Stay with us. This is going to be a great episode. So the big question is this: how do those of us in the real estate industry who have crazy amounts of ambition, how do we think bigger than the building of our own empires? How do we create success and significance, income and impact? My name is Justin Stoddard. This is my co-host, Stephanie Peck. And together, we bring you the Think Bigger Real Estate Podcast. All right, welcome back, everybody. Excited to be with you and introduce to you a gentleman, John Donnelly, who's the Executive Director of Sales for Service First Mortgage. What a great name for a company. And John, I'm excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us on the Think Bigger Real Estate Podcast today.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Justin. I'm pumped to be here.
Good.
This is great.
Well, let's dive in. I know having a growth mindset has been critical to your growth, your success. I'll say this: everybody that listens to this podcast aspires to be a bigger and bigger thinker, right? That's just who we are. We're big thinkers, yes. And we love being around people who help stretch that for us. And one thing that I believe is critical to that, and ultimately, we don't want to just think big. We want to actually achieve big. And I think each of us in this industry recognize that includes more sales. What I found is that when you have the right vision, the right values, which includes having a growth mindset, sales gets a lot easier. And you and your role, I'm sure you have some direct experience with that in leading other people. So let's dive in. How would you define, John? In fact, quickly, just give us maybe a 30-second background bio on kind of your story so people have some context.
Yeah, just real quick. I started in the mortgage industry as a loan officer in 1997. So I've seen a lot of ups and downs over the years. I built a pretty large production team that grew into a branch. That branch kind of went into multiple branches. And so I was doing a lot of production, and I realized one of my strengths, my superpower is kind of coaching. Listening is a big thing I do. And so I started leaning into recruiting and coaching, and I find myself running the division of a company, have a lot of loan officers and managers that report up to me. So my focus is recruiting, coaching, development, that type of thing.
Love it. So you're knee to knee in the weeds all day, every day of leading humans, helping them to have this growth mindset. So I appreciate that. How would you define, John, a growth mindset? What does that mean to you?
To me, that means that, kind of go back to the simple book of having a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. A growth mindset means that you're open to learning, you're open to taking ideas from other people, and that you're not closed-minded in the sense that you feel like you kind of know the way to do things, and that you're not going to take input, if you will, and decide if that input is good for you or not, and if you can apply that to your business. For me, it's not an option. I'm a lifelong learner. I read books all the time, and I'm always taking in other people's ideas. And so just being open-minded to me is kind of a growth mindset in a simple way. That's how I guess I would put it.
The book, in case anybody here loves a textbook style read, the book Mindset by Carol Dweck is what comes to mind. And I think that's what you were referencing.
That's it.
There's this fixed mindset, which essentially says, I am who I am. Right? Like that's just who I am.
Yes.
That's the way I'll always be. There's others that realize like, no, I'm elastic. I can expand, I can grow. And so when I hear you say that, I think being around people that believe that, and I think one thing that stands out to me that maybe you can relate to is that there's people who believe they have a growth mindset, but they hate being wrong. Like, don't prove me wrong. Don't tell me that my way isn't right, or I'll get very defensive. And I've even found that myself at times. And it's troubling whenever that pops its head up, because I don't want to be that way. I realize that pride and my own ego gets in the way of growth. And so I think part of having a growth mindset is in being humble and actually like being excited about being proven wrong. Cause it's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. That means there's opportunity for growth. If I'm always right, that means I've already reached the highest high, right? I'm already there, I've already arrived, which may not be conducive to like the ultimate life and impact that I want to have. And so I don't know if that kind of relates to you. You maybe have people in your organization who have maybe spun out. They didn't belong or stick with Service First Mortgage because they didn't
Yeah.
have both the growth mindset and the lack of ego to be able to actually grow.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, the culture kind of is a certain way to have a growth mindset. And also, you have to be open to hearing another way. And maybe there is a better way sometimes, but it's for you to determine that. So, yeah, I love the way you said that. I wanted to share something that just, as you kind of we just connected here and we're talking about this mindset. I want to share just a little story that I think is really interesting, probably. I read this book called The 12-Hour Walk last spring. I don't know if you heard of it. Colin O'Brady has it, and it challenges you to walk out your front door and take a 12-hour walk and just think and have no music, no dogs, nothing, and just go. And it doesn't matter how far you walk. And so it was really this, I just did it one day. I read the book. I told my wife next Sunday I'm heading out the door, and she's like, okay. And for me, it was kind of like a 12-hour meditation in a way. You go through all these thoughts, crazy thoughts. And one of the things that I thought about was, my own development and kind of my mindset toward my own personal development. And one of the things I've found is I really like learning from other people and trying to look at who's the people I want to model myself after, if you will. And so I kind of came up with this idea of a board of directors. That's maybe not the best name for it, but these 10 people sitting around a table that are like coaching me in their ways. People like Tony Robbins, who's been a big impact in my life. And I kept just thinking about this idea and what can I learn from them and how can I be like them and bring that into my life. To me, that's the idea of a growth mindset, is just being open to learning from other people. And like, I came up with this one theme after thinking through all this was, I'm trying to be a class act. And so that was just the term I came up with. It kind of, when I looked at all the people I picked on my board, which was people from like Kobe Bryant to Tony Robbins to John Maxwell, all these different kind of people, right? And I'm trying to just, shape the way people view me. And so I came up with this idea of a class act. So I've been using this filter now for a few months. I'm like, is this presentation I'm putting together what I consider a class act? Is it the way walking into this meeting? Am I considered a class act? It doesn't mean I have it all right. Like, I'm not perfect. Trust me. I'm just working toward being that. But I think it's kind of a neat way of looking at things. When I pick 10 people I'm trying to model myself after and learn how they've worked, done it in their life. There's something neat when you can learn from people that have already had success, and then you try to adopt the things you want to and apply it to your life. So I don't know. I haven't been telling that story, but I thought it might be relevant to what you've been talking about.
It's super relevant. So this 12-hour walk, did you walk around your town, your community? Like how far did you go in 12 hours?
I went 60,000 steps and 30 miles in my 12-hour walk, which was a lot more than a lot of people. But, I walked out my front door. I live here in Dallas, Texas, and I just started going. And I found that really I was going to somewhere that might have a restroom. That was the only thought I had because I'm in a city. So I had to get, where am I going to stop next? And I took notes like crazy. I just kept writing. I really talked my notes because I didn't stop and write. I just kept writing, and it was fascinating what came of it. My big takeaway was I'll date myself, but I'm turning 50. I just turned 50, and I wanted to do something significant, and so I went and signed up to hike Kilimanjaro. I'm going in June, so that's like a big thing for me. And so I started working out, and I made this big commitment, and to be honest, it's changing my life for a real positive way. Because my health has changed. I have this excitement. I'm aiming at this big goal, and it's crossing over into my business because it's just something that's really pushing me toward this big goal in June. I'm going in June. So,
man,
all from a 12-hour walk. Just from this 12-hour walk.
What an experience. And it sounds like from that as well as when you decided to have a board of directors. Is that what I'm understanding? Is it was during that time where you're like, I need to model some people who I would deem as having lived a great life. And I'm gonna sit with them. You know, it's interesting that reminds me. I believe Napoleon Hill teaches that same principle: is that you can have a board of directors around you, people, and so they don't have to be alive. They don't have to actually have access to them, but you run you run your life's decisions through a filter of what would this person think of this? Would they advise me to do this? Would they advise me not to do this? Right? And it's pretty fascinating to think.
It was. I actually didn't read that from Napoleon Hill, but somebody else had told me that, and I thought it was cool that you just connected the dots the same. But you're right. I mean, if you stop and think, John Maxwell says you have to write every day, you have to read every day, you have to think every day, and you have to file every day. And so if you're doing these kind of things every day and you're trying to have this growth mindset of just getting better in all aspects of your life, you can sit there and think about this board of directors and see what kind of advice they would give you. Also, there's another book I read, and this is where the thought came from, to be honest. This individual took 10 people that were influential in his life, and he had a painting made of all of them in that painting, and he put it up in his office, and that was who he's trying to model himself after. So it kind of came from that idea, is where, for me, and maybe that came from Napoleon Hill, I don't know. But I think you learn a lot from other people's stories, right? And that's what I'm trying to do.
You know, I had last 2 weeks I've been at big conferences. One was a big real estate conference down in Cabo. Last week I was at the 10X Growth Conference in Las Vegas. And, you know, on the stage, Grant Cardone brought on people who have achieved some of the highest levels of success, right? People like Jimmy John, right? People like Martha Stewart, people like Ryan Reynolds. And, you know, I don't want to emulate every part of these people's lives, but I can take a component of each one of them to say they're best in the world at that thing. And oftentimes, as I look back, like even Jimmy John, right, who's built $1 billion sandwich empire, that it was oftentimes just a fanatical focus on the details, on just being really, really good at the simple things. It's not, you don't necessarily have to have some magnificent talent, superstar talent, but you just get really, really good at focusing on what matters to your customers, and then duplicating that, right? Having that, building a culture around that. And so there was a lot of things that I took away, but my point is that I wouldn't have had all of those thoughts and all that thinking and all that introspection had I not put myself in a new environment and gone looking to think bigger, right? Gone looking to expand my possibilities. But because I was there, I was forced to, right? Just because you're hearing people that have had incredible success stories in life and even overcome difficult challenges, right? One of the most interesting things was Martha Stewart's, right, 5 months in jail. Like what she learned from that, right? Like just and how she overcame and how she adapted to that and learned a lesson, and then went on to bounce back even bigger than ever before, right? I think her celebrity grew after that. I think there's great lessons in that it's not always a smooth path, but as long as we're learning and growing, right, having that growth mindset of even in difficult circumstances, and maybe even especially in difficult circumstances, I can really grow. And I think when we have that mentality and we surround ourselves with people that are like that, we can't help but just keep having a better and better life and more impact. Pretty fun.
Man, I think you really did sum that up. You take just a little bit from everybody, but you're still your own unique person. You do it your own way. And, you know, you just made me kind of think about, I got to see Jesse Itzler last week. Kind of cool for me. I got to see Jesse Itzler speak, and I got to bring my daughter, who's 21 years old, to be with me to see him. And that was her first time to ever see a conference or be part of something. That was a really cool moment for her and I. One of the things he shared was that he was training for this 100-mile race, and he ends up hiring this guy, Chad, who's an old Navy SEAL, to come help him try to train to get through this barrier. He's stuck at mile 38 in his practice. He couldn't get through. I'm really trying to summarize this story. So he said, we're going to start training tomorrow. I've got 3 rules for you. 1, you can never quit. 2, no matter when you have a negative thought come in your brain, you've got to release it, because if you give it power, it'll grow. And number 3, every time I ask you how you feel, you have to say outstanding, no matter how you feel. And so they did some training and they got through this. So talk about mindset, right? Anyway, Chad does the race with him. At mile 78, Jesse bonks. He's like, I'm struggling, Chad. And he goes, well, let me tell you something. He goes, nobody knows this about me. And he's running with him. He goes, but I never get tired. He goes, it's amazing. He goes, I just never get tired. And he goes, I think the same for you. I think you never get tired too. And he goes, when we get to that next aid station, I want you to introduce me and you to that aid station. And I want you to tell the secret to this lady that we never get tired. And he goes, that mindset of saying I never get tired not only got me to mile 80, but it got me all the way to 100 miles. And he goes, I never would have made it without that shift in my mindset. I was like, that's a cool story, because I'm going to go climb this mountain pretty soon, and I may need that. I may need that moment to get through the summit day. But just a different kind of mindset shift. You got to be open. If you go back to the beginning of what we're saying, they say you never learn anything when you're talking. So you got to be a good listener, and you got to decide what's the right thing for you.
That's good stuff, John. I'm sad that we're short on time and we're out of time, but it's been such a pleasure to get to know you. If people are interested in learning more about you and how you have impacted the industry, where might they go?
Yeah, go to johndonnelly.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's kind of my hot spot. I live on LinkedIn, John Donnelly on LinkedIn. So I appreciate you having me on here, Justin. It's a great conversation. I love your podcast. So you guys are doing
Thanks,
good
man.
work.
I appreciate what you contributed to today. This topic is one of my favorite, and you've really added a lot of substance to it. So appreciate it very much. For everybody listening here today, my final request of all of us is to get in bigger rooms and to go think bigger. And those bigger rooms oftentimes help us to do that more quickly. So thanks, John. Appreciate you. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Before you go, we've got one more invitation for you. We all know that listening to a podcast is not enough to help you to become a big thinker and high achiever. We must take action. So the very first step, think about one lesson learned from this podcast that you'd like to apply, and send it to us in the form of a direct message at Think Bigger Real Estate. We look forward to hearing